Okay, let's dive into something really, well, out there. Picture this. It's July 4th, 1950, White Sands Proving Ground, New Mexico.
Right. The heart of U.S. rocket testing back then.
Exactly. And there's this rocket technician, Daniel Fry. He's missed the last bus into town, figures he'll take a walk, looks up, and something just isn't right with the stars.
Yeah, he sees something moving, silent, impossible. And then it lands.
And get this, he claims he then took a ride in it, all the way from New Mexico to New York City and back, in maybe half an hour.
And the kicker, feeling zero acceleration, none.
Which sounds completely impossible, right? Like the G-forces alone.
You'd think it would crush you instantly.
So that's what we're digging into today. Daniel W. Fry's story, the White Sands incident, and this message he says he received called Allen's Message to Men of Earth. We're pulling this straight from the documents, the source material.
And Fry himself, based on these sources. He's an interesting character. Born 1908, lost his parents young, couldn't afford college, so he basically educated himself in science at the library.
Self-taught. And he becomes this explosives and rocketry expert, works for Aerojet, ends up at White Sands setting up instruments for rocket tests.
So yeah, not just some random person off the street. This is someone familiar with cutting-edge propulsion in 1950.
Okay, so back to July 4th. He misses the bus, takes a walk, looks up, sees stars just blinking out, one then another.
And realizes something big and dark is moving towards him, silently.
He described it as initially matching the night sky, really hard to see. Then closer, it's this ovate spheroid shape, like a flattened egg.
About 30 feet across, maybe 16 feet high, polished metal surface, but with this slight violet shimmer to it.
And it lands, just settles down about 70 feet away. No sound, no bump, nothing.
I mean, imagine seeing that. A craft that size landing without a whisper. That alone breaks all the rules we know.
His first thought apparently was kind of funny. If the Russians have ships like this, God help America.
Right. But he quickly realized, no, this isn't Russian. It's not ours.
His instinct, run, obviously.
But his curiosity just took over. He called it almost a mania for science. He had to see it up close.
So he walks towards it, circles it, no seams, no rivets, no doors, just smooth metal.
And then he reaches out and touches it.
Brave, or maybe reckless. He said it felt incredibly smooth, like pearl or glass with a thin film, and he felt this slight tingling in his hand.
And that's when the voice came. Not from the ship, but like right beside him, in his head almost.
Say what?
Better not touch the hole, pal. It's still hot. Scared him so much he fell backwards.
Hot. But it wasn't heat like we think of it, right?
No, not thermal heat. Alan, the voice explained. It was this energy field around the hull. Really powerful right at the surface, repelling other matter.
Like a force field?
Sort of, yeah. Used for protection and also to cut down air friction massively. But it diminishes incredibly fast with distance, like by the 7th power of the distance.
7th power, wow, that's steep.
Exactly. And the hot part. Alan said prolonged contact, maybe a minute or more, could trigger a biological reaction. Your skin makes antibodies, affects the liver, could be fatal over time.
Yikes. Lucky Fry just touched it briefly then.
Alan seemed to think so, assuming Fry's biology was similar enough, which he believed it was.
And this voice, Alan, he sounded American, but wasn't.
Right. He said he'd spent 2 years learning English idiom for this specific assignment. And get this, he wasn't even in the small ship.
What? Where was he?
In a mothership, orbiting about 900 miles up. The smaller craft was remote-controlled.
Remote-controlled from 900 miles away in 1950.
Yeah.
Okay. Why the small ship, then?
Its main job was collecting atmospheric samples. They needed them for biological adaptation. Alan figured it would take about 4 more years for them to adapt to Earth's atmosphere, gravity, microbes, all that stuff.
Adaptation, okay, but why talk to Fry? Why him specifically?
Alan said Fry's brain receives well. Not just transmits, but receives. And crucially, his mind wasn't hardened into the mold of current scientific thinking, unlike many Earth scientists.
Ouch. That's a bit of a critique of mainstream science, isn't it?
It is. They use this analogy like an ant climbing a tree representing knowledge. Top scientists get way out on a lower branch, focused on complex details, losing sight of the main trunk of simple truths.
And when things don't fit, they retreat into abstract math, like going underground in a subway instead of seeing the direct path.
That's the idea. Fry, without that rigid training, was maybe more open to evidence that just didn't fit. Plus, his curiosity beating his fear. They saw that as a good sign.
Curiosity opens doors. Literally in this case.
Pretty much. Alan told him an opening would appear. Fry heard a hiss, a click, and this oval section slid back into the hull.
And inside, What was it like?
Surprisingly basic. A bare metal room, maybe 9 by 7 feet, 4 seats molded like contour chairs. That's it.
Simple, utilitarian. Made for cargo mostly, but could take passengers. And there was this lens thing providing light.
Yeah, like a small projector lens in the wall, giving off this diffuse light.
Okay, so Alan, talking in his head, asks where he wants to go. Yep. And suggests New York and back in 30 minutes. Says the view of the city lights from 20 miles up is something else.
Now, the acceleration question comes up again. Fry's worried, right? No seatbelts.
Exactly. But Alan explains their propulsion is totally different. The force doesn't push the ship from one point. It acts on every single atom of the ship and everything inside it, all at once, equally.
Every atom. So you don't feel it, because you and the ship are being moved by the exact same force in the exact same way.
Precisely. There's no relative force between you and your seat pushing you. So no sensation of acceleration, no matter how extreme it is. Their only limit is the available force.
Mind-bending. What about gravity, then?
As they went up, the same force accelerating the ship also acted on Fry's body proportionally to Earth's gravity. So the feeling of weight against the seat stayed normal relative to the ship.
Ah, so they control that force field to mimic gravity, too.
Essentially, yes. When they're between planets, away from a big gravity source like Earth, they reproduce gravity artificially using that same principle. And that difference in gravity levels is why they need years to adapt to Earth. Our gravity puts a real strain on their bodies.
Okay, this is a lot. Then Alan starts talking about Earth science.
Yeah, and he finds it, well, overcomplicated. He uses the example of how we planned to power nuclear submarines back then.
Right, the whole chain. Reactor, heat exchanger, steam, turbine, generator.
Yeah, a complex system, maybe 30% efficient at best. Alan contrasts with their method. A simple thermopile directly converts heat to electricity. No moving parts, 94 to 98% efficient, smaller, cheaper.
So his point is we get stuck on complex solutions instead of finding simpler fundamental ones.
That seems to be it. Trying to make one specific concept like the electron being both a particle and a wave explain everything instead of grasping the underlying unity leads to complex gadgets instead of simple principles.
And this connects to matter and energy. He had a different take on EMC too.
He did. Said Einstein's equation is mathematically sound, but the conclusion that matter and energy are convertible is wrong.
Wrong. How?
Alan said they're just different aspects of the same thing. How they appear depends entirely on the observer's point of reference.
Okay, explain that, like the 2D plane analogy.
Exactly. Look at a flat sheet edge on, it's a line that's like the energy aspect. Look at it face on, it's a surface the matter aspect. You didn't change the sheet, just your viewpoint. Velocity, Alan said, changes this reference point.
So reaching light speed doesn't mean infinite mass. It means, from your original viewpoint, it's rotated entirely into the energy aspect.
That's the idea. It appears as pure energy relative to you.
Yeah.
And you can't exceed light speed from a given reference point because that rotation is complete, basically.
Whoa, okay, so while Alan's explaining this, universe-altering physics. They're flying.
Yep. Fry sees the lights go by St. Louis, Cincinnati, Pittsburgh. Then, New York City from 20 miles up.
What was that like?
Fry described it as a vast array of millions of blue-white diamonds.
Just stunning.
They slowed down to maybe 600 miles per hour over the city so he could really see it.
And coming back down, any weird sensations?
Just a mild lifting feeling like a slow elevator. Then his weight felt normal again. Alan mentioned Fry handled the gravity shifts well, maybe because we Earthlings are just used to variable gravity all the time.
Variable gravity. Oh, like jumping, falling, stuff like that.
Could be. Things other species might not experience as much.
Then Alan offered him a thrill. Simulated weightlessness.
Yeah, near zero G. Fry said it was bizarre feeling his organs almost spring upwards, released from gravity's constant pull. He compared it to Earth roller coasters or jets doing outside loops.
And Alan had no idea what those were.
Nope. Had to ask Fry to explain roller coaster. A little moment of cultural exchange, I guess. Shows the gaps in understanding, even for them.
Okay, so after the weightlessness demo, Fry notices something on the seat.
Yes. A symbol he hadn't seen clearly before. The tree and the serpent.
The tree and the serpent. That's an ancient Earth symbol, isn't it? From loads of cultures.
Exactly. Seeing it there on this clearly alien craft. That must have been jarring.
And it leads to the biggest revelation yet.
Absolutely. Alan tells him their ancestors originally came from Earth.
Wait, what? They're the descendants of ancient Earth people?
That's what Alan claimed. He talked about these great ancient civilizations on continents we might call Mu, Lemuria, Atlantis.
Legends, right.
Right? But Alan described them as having science far beyond ours now. They learned to rotate entire masses upon the energy axis, maybe linking back to that matter-energy concept.
But things went wrong.
Terribly wrong. Rivalry, bitterness between these empires. It led to war, using weapons of absolute energy,
Huh.
1,000 times stronger than our H-bombs.
Oh, man. Total destruction.
Pretty much, only a few survivors, and the entire planet's surface was irradiated, dooming any descendants left behind to genetic damage, mutations, deterioration.
Chilling warning from the past. Or their past, I guess. So how did they survive?
6 of their aerial craft escaped the main destruction, landed on a high plateau. Modern Tibet, Alan said. They held a council.
And decided.
4 crews decided to try and make it to another planet. Mars was the best bet then and a good position, more habitable than it is now. 3 ships made it.
3 ships reached Mars. What about the others?
The crews of the other 2 ships stayed on the plateau in Tibet. They thought they could survive there. Alan said their descendants eventually blended into the population, becoming part of modern humanity.
Wow. So some stayed, some went to Mars. What happened to the Mars colonists?
They struggled, went through their own dark ages just trying to survive. But they kept the memory alive. The history of Earth's fall became the great lesson.
Don't repeat the same mistakes.
Exactly. So when they eventually rebuilt their science, they always kept it balanced with social and spiritual development. They learned the hard way what happens when material science outpaces everything else.
And now, where are they now?
They're planet independent, live in huge spacecraft, totally self-sufficient, mastered energy. They don't need planets, except maybe for raw materials now and then.
So what are they doing back here?
Their focus now, Alan said, is helping other races, like us, who are approaching that same critical point, that risk of self-destruction through unbalanced science.
So the White Sands encounter, it wasn't just a random flyby. It was part of a mission, maybe,
Yeah.
rooted in their own history.
It seems that way, a deliberate attempt to pass on that great lesson.
Which brings us to the message itself, the specific one Alan delivered later in 1954.
Right. Fry had apparently been struggling with what to do, went off-grid to Oregon. Alan contacted him again, April 28, 1954.
And started with,
Well, Dan, how much longer are you going to hide your light under a bushel? Pretty direct.
no kidding, telling him to get the word out.
Explicitly. Write a book, talk to newspapers, radio, TV, whatever it takes. Share what you learn.
And Fry's reaction? Predictable, I guess.
Totally. Fear of ridicule, being called a liar, a fool, a charlatan, media twisting it, being accused of doing it for money or fame, all the usual stuff. Yeah, you can see why he'd hesitate. What did Alan say to that? He basically said, look, ridicule's what ignorant people use to block out truth that scares them. It's the price you pay for being ahead of the curve. He even quoted their ancient records. It is easier to ridicule than to investigate, but it is not as profitable.
Good quote. Did he offer any comfort?
He assured Fry he wasn't alone. Others were sensing the danger, looking for answers, and that the power of thought is real people, thinking positively for him, would actually be with him, energetically speaking.
Okay, but the big question remains. If it's so urgent, why not just land? You know, White House lawn, prove it to everyone.
Fry asked that. Alan called it wishful thinking, said there were huge psychological and practical problems with that.
Psychological.
2 bad outcomes. Either people see them as gods and stop taking responsibility for fixing things themselves, or they see them as terrifying invaders and react with fear and hostility. Neither helps. Lasting good has to come from Earth people.
Makes sense. And practically.
Instant military lockdown. They'd be surrounded, their tech seized as a military secret. Alan pointed out this Earth tendency, born from war, to see knowledge as something the state owns and controls.
And that secrecy breeds tension.
Exactly. If the U.S. got the tech first, Alan reasoned, Russia might launch a preemptive strike out of fear. He actually mentioned Pearl Harbor as the kind of lesson learned there. Landing in both places at once would just accelerate the arms race. It would trigger the very catastrophe they want to prevent.
So no easy answers. It had to be Earth people carrying the message, like Fry.
You and the other people whom we have contacted, Alan said. You guys have to carry the ball.
Which leads to what is the core problem, according to Alan. It's not nukes themselves.
No, nuclear war is just a symptom. The real disease, Alan said, is simple but overlooked. The imbalance between the 3 branches of science.
Branches.
Spiritual, social, and physical or material science.
Okay. And the imbalances.
Spiritual and social sciences should be the foundation. But material science, driven by our physical needs and desires, grows exponentially like, according to the square of time, Alan said. It just takes off.
while the other two.
Grow linearly, directly with time. And often, we don't even maintain that growth. We neglect them,
So you get this massive, accelerating technological structure.
built on a crumbling, inadequate foundation of social wisdom and spiritual understanding.
And that can only end one way.
Collapse. The structure outgrows the base, falls, and ruins everything. That's what happened before on Earth, Allen claimed. We're in danger of destroying ourselves simply because our understanding hasn't kept pace with our power.
And it's not just about avoiding war. The existence of the weapons itself poisons society.
Yeah, creates deep insecurity. Destroys long-term thinking. Why build for the future if there might not be one? He even linked it to things like juvenile delinquency, saying kids feel that underlying insecurity acutely. He mentioned an official predicting 40 years of tension, 2 generations under that threat. No civilization can survive that, he argued.
So what's the fix? Did Allen offer a solution?
He did, and it was simple. Strengthen the foundation. Crucially, he said, don't tear down the material structure. Trying to halt technological progress would just cause a different kind of collapse.
So tech isn't the enemy.
Not at all. Material science can grow without limit if we build the necessary social and spiritual support underneath it.
How do we do that? Build that foundation?
First step, realize it's absolutely vital. Allen insisted the wisdom is already here in philosophy, in religious texts. He used the Tower of Babel as an example of trying to reach heaven purely through material means, forgetting the spiritual. Once we grasp the necessity of the foundation, building it becomes almost automatic.
And the core of that spiritual and social sciences.
Our relationship with each other and our relationship with, well, God, or the ultimate reality. And the absolute key ingredient for progress, a sincere desire for better understanding.
Understanding. That word keeps coming up.
It's central. Allen even suggested that words like love and charity in our scriptures should often be translated as understand and understanding, like thou shalt strive to understand the Lord.
Makes sense. You can't love or follow something you don't understand.
Exactly. And understanding your neighbor means truly putting yourself in their place. If people did that, they couldn't be enemies. Knowledge is head stuff, he said. Understanding is heart stuff.
So for Earth right now, the big need is understanding between nations.
That's the immediate critical need. Use our amazing communication tools, radio, TV, internet now for that. For genuine understanding, not propaganda, we need to recognize that deep down, all people share the same basic hopes, fears, needs, desires. That's the real basis for one world.
He also talked about resources, didn't he? A thought experiment.
Yeah, a powerful one. We spend billions on foreign aid treating symptoms. We spend tens of billions, hundreds maybe, on military prep feeding the disease itself. What if, Allen asked, we spent just 10% of that war money on tackling the actual illness, the lack of understanding?
What did he think would happen?
He thought the illness could be cured in a few years.
Wow. Cured? And the outcome?
Immense potential. Freedom from the fear of destruction lets industry boom, raises living standards, frees people from want and fear. We'd pass the critical point safely. Allen put it beautifully. Your greatest era, your golden age lies just before you. You have only to go through the proper door.
The door of understanding, but they still won't land openly.
Not until there's solid proof the majority of humanity actually wants that understanding, which, he implied, we're nowhere near yet.
And his final words to Fry.
Very profound, very simple. Examine all things. Cling to that which is good and do your best.
Wow. Just do your best. Okay, so the contact didn't end there. The sources say it continued.
That's right. Fry apparently had ongoing contact, received a lot more information over time.
And other people reported similar things, independently.
Yes, the documents mention corroborating accounts from different parts of the world, people reporting similar experiences, similar communication methods, that voice in the head thing called clairaudience.
Clairaudience. Different from telepathy or just your own thoughts?
That's how it's described. And the core message was consistent. Examples mentioned include Austria, Canada, Italy.
Any theories in the sources on how that communication worked?
Some speculation. Maybe an electronic device influencing auditory nerves, or direct modulation of brain waves. Even activating dormant parts of the brain, the third eye perhaps. Pretty speculative, of course.
And these beings, how are they described overall?
As highly evolved individuals, not average members of their race, perhaps more like what we might call masters or adepts, showing mastery not just of tech-space travel, gravity, energy, but also deep knowledge of history, even our own ancient past, maybe better than we know it ourselves, and seemingly some insight into our future path.
So the message remains urgent. The situation is serious. Don't repeat the ancient mistake.
That's the core takeaway. Avoid that tragic error.
But there's still hope. It's not inevitable.
Definitely hope. The catastrophe can be averted, Alan suggested, if we heed the warning, find that path through understanding. And there's even a hint of potential future intervention should the need arise.
Ending with that powerful line from the source material, "We are not alone."
Yeah, it's quite a journey, isn't it? Starts with a silent UFO landing, goes through physics lessons, ancient history, and ends with this fundamental challenge about human understanding.
So let's recap this deep dive. Daniel Fry's story, if you take it as presented in these sources, gives us this glimpse of incredible technology, silent craft, no inertia, making metal transparent.
But also this hidden history, right?
Mhm.
Ancient Earth civilizations, a planetary catastrophe, refugees escaping to Mars.
And in tying it all together is this urgent warning. The real danger isn't the atom bomb itself, but the imbalance. Our technology racing ahead while our wisdom, our social and spiritual understanding, lags dangerously behind.
And the solution offered isn't some complicated treaty or 5-year plan. It's, well, simpler and maybe harder. A shift in focus, prioritizing understanding between people, between nations, and putting our resources there instead of into weapons and division.
So as you listen to this, whether you see Fry's account as literal fact or maybe a compelling modern parable, think about that core message from Alan. Do you see that imbalance he talked about in the world today? Technology leaping forward while understanding? Maybe struggles to keep up.
Does that idea resonate that maybe our biggest threat isn't external, but internal? Our own failure to understand each other and ourselves well enough to handle the power we've created.
Alan suggested Earth's golden age is right there, just through the proper door of understanding. We have these incredible tools now for global communication, tools Alan could only dream of. So the final thought is, how well are we actually using them to open that door, to build genuine understanding across all the lines that divide us?
And maybe more fundamentally, what would it really take for enough of us, the majority Alan spoke of, to truly desire that understanding enough to collectively decide to walk through that door?